Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the secret signing tunnel where the rumors don't go away and the player movement never ends. I'm joined by the one and only Moley once again. How are you, mate?
Yeah, doing well, my friend. As we just said on off air, I'm a little dehydrated. Played touch footy in the heat this morning. I'm getting too old and stupid for this game, but so long as my legs can keep moving forward, I'll keep going, off season or not.
That's right. Kudos to you for keeping yourself nice and fit, mate. It's good to see. Let's get stuck straight into it. Now, for all the new listeners out there, this segment's going to be your ultimate go to when it comes to signings and player movements. So each week, Molly and I will discuss who's off contract, who's hitting the open market. We're just going to have a chat about, our thoughts when it comes to the impact on these movements, particularly on the former club and the new club when it comes to those player signings. Also, any rumors floating around and much more. Now, everything's going to be available to listen and watch via our link tree at NRL Nostradamus. And we're also going to put the link at the bottom of every episode for easy access. So we're talking YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Threads, X, TikTok, you name it. We're on there. Molly, of course, will be sharing across all of his platforms. So make sure you guys give him a follow so you don't miss anything. Now, Molly, let's get straight into it. Josh Addo-Carr, 2-year deal at the Eels. Are the Para fans going to be stoked with this or sort of a little bit skeptical about it all?
Well, they've lost Maker Sivo, haven't they? And what a cult hero he was, and what a amazing try scorer he was. I thought his form probably fell away late in the year, and now he's off to England. So I think it's fair to say the Eels didn't want to retain him, but what a player they've replaced him with. I guess it's just a question of how much money he got. I know he was on $500,000 at the Bulldogs. With the Eels are going to pay him the same amount of money. But we know one thing, he'll deliver, he'll score tries, he'll scorch down that wing, and I think he'll be a fan favourite pretty quickly out Paraguay.
Yeah, I totally agree, mate. I think actually for those viewers and listeners, it was around 350 a year, which I think is a pretty good price, really.
Yeah, that's right. For a winger who your average winger, you certainly wouldn't pay much more than 200,000. But we're talking about an elite winger who can score tries out of nothing, probably as quick as anyone in the game, and a real showman who'll bring people through the gate. So yeah, if they got him for 350, which is the same figure I heard, pretty good deal.
Yeah, very, very good deal. Let's hope he can bring some much needed positivity to a pretty negative season that Para had this year moving forward. Now, let's get straight into a couple of actual signings that have happened and player extensions. Jordan McLean, he's had a 1-year extension at the Cowboys. I'm going to stick with the Cowboys for a little bit here. Jackson Paulo has shifted from the Seagulls to the Cowboys. Actually, was Jackson Paulo at the Seagulls this season?
Just getting back to Jordan McLean for a second. I spoke a few weeks ago, and he hadn't signed that extension yet, but he was confident of getting it. And when you consider he's 34, 35, he had a pretty good year, and he said he's obviously made his name in Melbourne, and he said he really feels like North Queensland's home now, and I think you'll find after he retires, which will probably be at the end of next season, he'll stay up there and get on the coaching staff, or certainly have something to do with the club, the way he was talking.
Yeah, he'll certainly have an impact on some of those younger players coming through the grades as well. Hopefully, they can blood a few young forwards into their semi-aging roster up there. Surely they've got a bit of coin up their sleeve with Valentine Holmes leaving.
Yeah, that's right. And as you say, they've got a bit of an aging roster. Val was playing good football, but he's in the veteran class now. And Jason Tamalolo, he's the big question mark is how much petrol's left in the tank there. Todd Payton's been really conservative with him, and it's been a bit of a risk from Todd because there are people who don't like what he's doing with Jason Tamalolo, but I think he's playing the long game. I think he's trying to see out this 10-year deal. I think he's still got 2 or 3 more years, but he definitely doesn't have the impact he had a few years back. He played some good games, but wasn't quite as consistent as he was probably 5, 6 years ago. He was the Payne Haas, wasn't he? He was the most dynamic forward in the game, and he's probably not in the top 10 now. So his legs are starting to lose some of that power he had. So be very interesting to see just how much game time he gets next year and what sort of role he plays for the Cowboys.
Speaking of veteran front rowers, there's a few weird clauses with a few veteran front rowers for next season. Hearing David Clemmer needs to play 14 games or more for the Tigers to get a contract for 2026. And Christian Welsh is the one I'm concerned about the most. He needs to play 18 games to get a contract extension for 2026. Can you see them sort of hanging up the boots, or is it a case of them maybe looking for another club? Because I think Clemmer can play 14 games, but Christian Welsh playing 18 with Stefano coming to the club, I don't know.
Yeah, that's right. And it just takes 1 or 2 suspensions and 1 or 2 injuries, and that 18 can be out of reach. And I think there's a and or with that if he gets to play state of origin, he gets a new deal. But I don't know what his chances are of breaking origin. But I know coaches are very sneaky with these sort of deals, and that's why I'm a bit wary of them. I know players who've, say, had to play 20 games, they get to 19 games, the coach doesn't want them there next year, so they're all of a sudden dropped. So yeah, it's not a good cause for a player, and I don't know why the managers get sucked into them.
Yeah, that's I've never heard of them before. So this is the first that I've heard of it. I think it's outrageous. Certainly doesn't leave the player in the box seat, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's right. And as I said, particularly now with the crackdown on high tackles, on all sorts of chicken wings and hip drops and all this. I mean, you can do one accidental hip drop and you're out for 4 weeks, and all of a sudden the 18's looking pretty hard to get, and you're always going to pick up injuries during a season. So yeah, it's a tough one for the players, and as I said, it really puts the coaches in the driving seat if they want to keep the player or they want to get rid of them.
Well, let's get straight into sort of a little bit on a lead on from that. So Christian Welsh, he's got Stefano coming to the club, and then they've already got a pretty well balanced forward pack. So I'm not really sure how he sort of fits in and actually gets to those 18 games, because he was even in and out of the squad this season, just gone. So I'm not really sure how he cracks those 18 games. He's going to hope that, in a good way, bad way situation, that some other players might get injured or suspended. So he gets a run. But for Clemmer, you've got the likes of, Fanua Pole sort of working his way into the starting lineup. Plus you've got Royce Hunt on his way to the Tigers. And the rumor swirling now is Terrell May very close to signing a deal with the Tigers too. Is that what you've heard?
Yeah, I've heard they're very keen, the Tigers, and they got the money to spend, and he'd be a great fit in that young Tigers pack. I still can't believe, frankly, that the Roosters are letting him go. I thought he was probably the best bench player in the game last season, in that what he brought, the energy, the enthusiasm, the drive. He was changing games for the Roosters, and for them to just say see you later, I was really surprised.
Yeah, well, a couple of viewers' questions, particularly from Eels and Tigers fans, a few Dragons fans in there. Where will May end up and which clubs are in the race? Now, the Bulldogs have pulled out. So the three clubs remaining seem to be the Eels, the Dragons, and the Tigers. Now, just throw my own personal opinion out on this one. I don't think the Eels are going to sign Terrell May. That's just my own personal viewpoint on that one. I think it's more down to the Dragons and the Tigers, but I think that also hinges on the caliber of halfback the Dragons are going to be able to recruit, because I don't think they can afford Terrell May and you know, an elite halfback. What's your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, it's a good call because if May's manager's smart, he'll say, "Well, who's going to be driving the ship?" At the moment, it's Kyle Flanagan, and I don't think he's got what it takes to get a team to the eight. And the Dragons are desperately looking for a halfback. I read a couple of weeks ago that Brodie Croft was their number one target at Leeds, but Leeds are playing hardball apparently, and so they either want a big fat transfer fee or they're just not interested in letting him go. And I've heard his form hasn't been all that fantastic either. So they're in a bit of a quandary, the Dragons, as to who to replace Ben Hunt, who did come up with 34 try assists last season. So whoever comes in, they're going to be filling big boots.
From Tony Finch. Since Bateman is leaving, who's going to replace him? Now, the reason why I want to tie that into the equation is I believe that Terrell May signing for the Tigers hinges on Bateman going to another club.
Yeah, and I think we can safely say Bateman won't be there. Some of the statements in the media from Tigers officials, some of the social media things, I think Bateman's had a little bit to say. There's obviously bad blood there. I think it's fair to say that they don't want him there. And again, I thought he was one of their better players last season. I thought for a guy who's in his mid-30s, coming from England, I thought he showed a lot of energy, a lot of drive, and he had a will to win that some of these young Tigers didn't seem to have. But again, surprising.
Yeah, who do you think would pick up Bateman? Because it looks like Manly's chances, which is where he's reported to go, are pretty much zero, because their roster's almost complete now. They've got Chris Patolo on a train and trial deal now as well, and they signed Takayaho the other week. So I believe their roster's pretty much filled. Is there a chance that he could go back to the Raiders?
Yeah, I mean the Raiders love a bomb, don't they? And yeah, yeah, that's right. Elliot Whitehead's gone, isn't he? So, yeah, I guess it depends how he left down there, how things ended up with Ricky. 'Cause, if he's still in Ricky's good books, then I guess he's a chance. And they again fairly young side. The Raiders could use his experience. And you spot on with Manly. I spoke to them the other day, and Takayaho just about completes the roster. They're quite happy with what they've got. The only way I could see him going there is if the Tigers kick some money in, and the Tigers seem that keen to get rid of him that they might do that. So that could be his exit clause and his way to Brookvale.
Yeah, the Tigers roster certainly is head scratching. Now, another veteran front rower, Matt Lodge. There's rumours that he might link up with Wayne Bennett at Souths. Can you see him going to another club, or have you heard anything? He said he's definitely going to stay in the NRL. Have you heard anything on Matt Lodge?
Yeah, well, I know he's another footballer looking at boxing as a possible sidelight if he doesn't get a gig. Wayne Bennett, I know, likes him. I know they've got a good relationship. He lives in the Manly area. I actually live in the Manly area and see him quite often, and he's a changed man for those who think he's still the wild boy you got in that terrible trouble in the USA, and it was a shocking thing he did. But I see him now with his kids at the local shops, and he's matured, he's aged, he's got older and wiser, and he still offers a bit on the field. And I thought the games he played for Manly, he wasn't too bad last season. So it will be interesting to see if someone takes a risk and picks him up. And with South could be with Bennett.
Well, this seems to be a forward segment. We'll stay on Manly for a little bit. Uh, Michael Cheekham, he's actually signed a 1 year deal at Manly as well. So he's moved there from the Rabbitohs. And Raymond Taumalo Vega, the winger, he's actually signed a 1 year extension too at the Seagulls. And as mentioned before, Chris Patolo's on a train and trial deal. So I don't think Bateman's fitting in anywhere here at Manly, but time will tell. Now, Leo Thompson, rumors have just come out today. The Raiders are keen. It makes sense. Joe Tarpany might have been in his ear at the recent Pacific Nations. What are you hearing there?
Yeah, look, I think he's as good as Terrell May. He's a real impact player. He's decided to go to the marketplace, and it's probably a smart move by him because there's three or four clubs, as you say, keen. The Raiders, Josh Papali'i's probably on his last legs. Maybe got another 12 months in him, maybe 2 years, but again, not the force that he was. So Leo Thompson would be a great fit down there for sure. But plenty of competition. Again, I think the Tigers would be looking at him if they don't get Terrell May. Dragons too. So yeah, there's plenty of clubs keen. That's for sure. And don't rule out the Knights. They could still come up with an offer to keep him there.
It's been reported that they have increased their offer, the Knights, for Leo Thompson. And as of course, his brother's signed for the club for next year. Look, it wouldn't shock me if he played at the Knights next season on an increased value deal for the Knights just to keep him for 1 more year, maybe. I don't know how good a business that is or whether it's worth it from the Knights' perspective, but it looks like some of these other clubs might not be able to afford Thompson until 2026 unless they get rid of some players in that situation.
Yeah, that's right. But if I was a chief executive, I'd be doing some wheeling and dealing because he's a gun player. Yeah, yeah, he's someone you want on board, and if you can get rid of some dead wood, send them off to England, send them to the Titans. I don't know. I'd get him in there.
Yeah, that's it. Now, another viewer question. Ricky Taylor. We're going to go a bit left field here. Any new Roosters signings? Have you heard anything from the Chooks? Is Ben Hunt going there? Is he not going there?
Well, that's a big question, isn't it? I see it as a perfect storm, pardon the pun, because they're without their halfback Sam Walker for the first half of the season, and then sooner or later Brandon Smith's going to go. So I can see Ben Hunt going to the Roosters as a halfback and then transitioning into a hooker probably for 2026. So and he's a Roosters type player, isn't he? He's busy. He wants to win. He's got a good culture to him. So I can see him being a really good fit for the Roosters, and money's no problem for the Roosters, so they can afford him.
Yeah, well, here's a curly one for you. I have heard from a reliable source that Reece Robson has been approached by the Roosters and is a very strong chance to sign with them for 2026, if not before. So, have you heard that yet?
No, I haven't. But as I said, Brandon Smith's going to be going, so they're going to need a hooker. Personally, I'd take Ben Hunt before I took Reece Robson, but I can see the Roosters will be hedging their bets. They know that there's a few clubs after Hunt, so Robson's probably their number two choice, and probably the number two or three hooker in the game at the moment, an Origin player and a key man for the Cowboys up there.
Jason Powsey, he said, do you think Brandon Smith will end up at the Warriors in 2025? Because Roosters have come out and said if a player comes along and takes him, now that's going to be a bit tricky with him being on the injury list for the first half of the season. But could you see Brandon Smith potentially going to the Cowboys if Robson goes to the Chooks?
Yeah, there could be something of a player swap there. But again, don't rule out the Warriors. He's a Kiwi. Quite often the Kiwis like going home after spending time in the big smoke. So yeah, it's one to watch. But then they've got a pretty good hooker in Wade Egan, the Warriors. So I rate him very highly. So whether he plays lock there or what they do with him. I'm not sure.
Well, some of the other clubs that could do with a hooker, the Rabbitohs, they're sort of running with Peter Memezelis at the moment, I believe. Seeing Cooks left. The Eels still haven't signed a genuine, you know, quality nine as such. Brandon and Joey Lussick of who they got on their books. Young Matty Arthur, he's left the club. There's been talks around Jaden Brayley coming, but maybe that's not happening anymore. The only club I can think of is maybe the Titans that could do with an out and out hooker.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, South, as you say, I don't think Mamazoulis is the answer at the moment for replacing such an experienced player in Damien Cook, so he might be a good fit there. Yeah, it's a jigsaw puzzle, isn't it? You just don't know how it's going to turn out, but there's plenty of business being done, but behind closed doors, I can tell you that.
Someone asked the question, Jesse Bullock, is Pappy off to the Sharks? Now, we answered that a little bit last week, but the talk now is that the Bulldogs seem to be more and more likely a destination for Ryan Pappenhausen. We know they've got $1.6 million in their salary cap up their sleeve. So a move there seems more and more likely. Now, if Pappy does sign for the Storm, then CR Logo can explore. Sorry, if Pappy resigns at the Storm, then Logo can look elsewhere. If you're the Storm and you're Ryan Pappenhausen, what do you do?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, isn't it? And we were speaking about Brandon Smith a few moments ago, and he came out with that stunning statement about a guy who was a former teammate in Pappenhausen. He said he was small, fragile, subject to injury, probably not worth the money. So I guess if anyone knows, it's a former teammate. It was quite a brutal takedown. It certainly took me by surprise. And you look at Pappenhausen, great player that he is. He has had some serious injuries over the years, but he came back this year and was really firing. But there's always that risk, isn't there? So whether the Storm re-sign him or go with young Farlogo, who's just a freakish talent. But as you say, they won't keep both of them. That's one thing. That's for sure. You can't have two fullbacks on big money, and if Pappenhausen stays, there'll be clubs jumping at Farlogo. So
Yeah, I suppose at the club you can't really have everyone, can you? So from the Storm's perspective, do you know what? If I'm Ryan Pappenhausen and you've got Logo there, I'm probably almost going to the Bulldogs. We know his partner's from Sydney and her family. Uh, Certainly puts them in contention for a premiership if Pappenhausen goes to the Dogs. That certainly strengthens their squad. And the Storm don't really lose too much in my opinion with Logo coming in there. However, if they do sign Pappenhausen, I don't know, like 750 I think is fair for Pappenhausen. I think maybe Pappenhausen has asked a little bit too much. He could probably get offers of 1 million elsewhere. It's a tough one because Pappenhausen is really in the box seat here. He can stay at the Storm, 750K, chance to win a premiership, or go to the Dogs on around 1 million, chance to win a premiership.
yeah, that's right. And the Dogs know they have to pay overs to attract players of his caliber. But you look at that Dogs back line, it's pretty handy. I think he'd fit in well there with guys like Jacob Kiraz, who I think was one of the most underrated players in NRL last season. Matt Burton with those booming kicks. You can just see Pappenhausen charging downfield and picking up the crumbs of them in attack. Yeah, they've got a good side, the Dogs. So probably just one big forward, one Leo Thompson short of being a top four team. But they're full of class, full of talent, and they play a good brand of football.
Yeah, and they've said the Bulldogs that if they don't get Pappy, they're going to go pretty hard for Ben Hunt.
Yeah, yeah, they will for sure. They know they need a halfback. Toby Sexton, good player, but not a player who can lead them to the top four. He did a fine job for him last year, but Ben Hunt's definitely a little bit higher class above.
Just a question on Ben Hunt. If you're the Broncos, because we know Ben Hunt would love to be back at the Broncos, would you be trying to onload a player or offload a player, sorry, from the club to make room for Ben Hunt? Because to me, it makes sense given Ezra Mam is more than likely going to be suspended for, if not the whole year, most of the year, to partner Adam Reynolds, and then Adam Reynolds is going to retire, and then Hunt can partner Ezra Mam next year.
Yeah, well, the Hunter Broncos was all the rage as a rumor this time last week, but then we're hearing he wants to stay in Sydney. But to answer your question, yes, I would get him on board. I mean, the Broncos, there was something sadly missing last year for the team that made the grand final the year before. And Ben Hunt might be the missing link, and they lack direction, particularly in games when Reynolds wasn't there. He's getting older. He's got problems with his hamstrings, so chances are he's going to miss a fair few games. So yeah, I'd get Ben Hunt back up there, quick, smart.
Absolutely. Now let's finish on a light note. The Dragons. So they got 900k spare. We've mentioned they really need a forward, really need a half, but they have re-signed the Couchman brothers, the twins, for another couple of seasons. Great news for the club and for both those players. I really think they're, I wouldn't call them the heart and soul of the club, but they certainly do bring that youth. They're juniors. They're from the area. Born and raised. It's a great signing for the club.
Yeah, it is. They're young blokes with enthusiasm, and the Dragons fans, I know, are so frustrated they've lost so many good young players to rival clubs. So it's good to see them wrap these two up, and yeah, I think they're already in that fan favourites category.
Well, thanks heaps for tuning in this week, everybody. Thanks again, Moley, for your insights, and join us again next week on the Secret Signing Tunnel.
Disclaimer: any views or opinions represented in this podcast and or Facebook and social media pages are personal and belong solely to the podcast owners and do not represent those of people, institutions or organizations that the owners may or may not be associated with in a professional or personal capacity. Unless explicitly stated, any views or opinions are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, organization, club, company, or individual. All content provided on this podcast is for informational purposes only. The owners of this podcast make no representation as to the accuracy or completeness of any information on this site or found by following any link on this website. Owners will not be liable for any errors or omissions in this information, nor for the availability of this information. The owners will not be liable for any losses, injuries, or damages from the display or use of this information.